Okay. Got it. Okay. That we've titled Images of God in the in music in the Machzor. We're coming up on the high holidays, and I like to think about who it is that we're supposedly approaching when we get to Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. Tonight, we're going to talk about the theology of Leonard.
On the video?
No, I don't want to get called on.
Amy, I won't call on you, but now I will. If you turn the video on, I promise I won't call on you. They just signed off.
We're just setting up, Rabbi. Sorry that we
No,
interrupted you.
okay.
And we always say, what is the matter with these people who don't know about mute? We've been doing this for a year and a half.
All right.
So we're guilty too. Anyway.
Welcome everybody. Leonard Cohen was a singer, songwriter, poet, and novelist. One of the most important in my lifetime. He was born in 1934 in Montreal. He's Canadian, and he died in 2016 in Los Angeles. He had lots of interests. One of them was theology. He was born to an observant Jewish family, and he found other religions fascinating as well. He found truth in Christianity. He studied Buddhism, and there are lots of religious images in his music, in his lyrics. I want to tell you, I always like when someone begins with what their background is. I am not a Leonard Cohen scholar. I'm a Leonard Cohen aficionada. I love his material. It moves me tremendously, but I am not a Leonard Cohen scholar. We're going to react to what he's saying tonight. I'm not going to present material chronologically. I'm going to present it thematically. And I will tell you that I haven't read a ton of reviews because I read some and everyone has an opinion about what these poems mean. Tonight, I'd like to hear what your opinion is. So what's the aim of our discussion going to be? Let's consider that by let's answer that question by considering the first of his poems that I'm going to present tonight. Okay. Someone want to read? Bob, thank you.
Who by fire? And who by fire, who by water? Who in the sunshine, who in the nighttime? Who by high ordeal, who by common trial? Who in your merry, merry month of May, who by very, very slow decay? And who shall I say is calling? And who in her lonely slip, who by barbiturate? Who in these realms of love, who by something blunt? Who by avalanche, who by powder? Who for his greed, who for his hunger? And who shall I say is calling? And who by brave ascent, who by accident? Who in solitude? Who is this my mirror? Who by his lady's command? Who by his own hand? Who in mortal chains? Who in power? And who shall I say is calling?
Do you recognize that? Do you recognize where that comes from?
No.
It comes from the Machzor. What does it come from in the Machzor?
The Musaf service.
Close.
Feel free to unmute and join.
I don't know what part of the service it is, but it's how you die, where it recalls about, yeah.
It's Unatana Tokef.
Hmm.
On Rosh Hashanah it is written, and on the fast day of atonement, it is sealed. Now, as we go down this very quickly, I want you to think about what is the difference between Unatana Tokef and what, besides all of the different ways to die, and what Leonard Cohen is saying. Leonard Cohen raises a question that's not in Unatana Tokef, and that's the question that's organizing this session and next week. The Unatana Tokef, how many will pass on, how many will be born, who will live and who will die, who will live a long life, who will come to an untimely end, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. What is different? What's he added? What's Leonard Cohen added to this that's not in Unatana Tokef? He adds a question.
Who shall I say
Which I
is
say is
calling?
calling.
Who shall I say is calling? Who is it that we're talking to? Who is it that we're praying to? There's a
praying.
story, I'm sorry. There's a story about a rabbi who goes into a kindergarten classroom to admire the art efforts of the Hebrew school students. And he says, "Nu, Rachel, what are you drawing?" "I'm drawing a picture of God, but no one knows what God looks like." "That's because I haven't finished my drawing yet." Leonard Cohen's question, who shall I say is calling, as I said, motivates this two-part series. Not what God looks like, but who is the God that we pray to, we pour our hearts to, we confess our sins to. I mean, many people go to services on the high holidays for many reasons. They go to be with the congregation, to meet old friends. You see who's there, who's sitting in different places, this year especially. They go to hear familiar music, the familiar melodies of the high holiday songs. Move us. And if we don't have that, it's a loss, it's a gap in our lives, in our year. But at the essence, the high holidays are about prayer. It's about pouring out our hearts. It's about confessing our sins. So we're going to talk about our understanding of God. Is that static or changeable? We're going to do that through the lyrics of Leonard Cohen. And if it varies, depending on what does it depend on? There are no right or wrong answers. Each of us may have different answers. And although I have my own ideas, I'm eager to hear yours. And do these concepts change at different times in our lives? And if they conflict, how is that possible? Okay? Those are the questions I'd like us to think about as we go through some of these songs. And I'm not playing the music only because we need 3 hours. The songs with the orchestral settings, etc., were too long to include.
Gloria,
Yes?
I just want to interject here that when you read it and said, "Who shall I say is calling?" I wasn't sure how to take that. I think that it could be taken two ways. It could be taken that who shall I say is calling, meaning God. How do I recognize God
Right.
calling me to my ultimate end? Or who shall I say is calling, who am I of these people? Who am I? Which one of these is me?
Yes.
It could go either way. It could go from,
Absolutely. Thank you.
oh,
No, absolutely. Because I hope I said, it's in my notes, I hope I said, who am I in this interaction? Who is Leonard Cohen? You know, where is he? What is he feeling? What is he saying? And how is he addressing God? Because it's a two-way street. I was once in Slichot in a congregation, and I was co-leading with a colleague, and my colleague's cell phone started ringing. And he answered it on the bima, and he held it out to the congregation. And people were appalled, but I had to say something. So what I said was, I've never had God answer prayer so quickly and so immediately. What do you do? I want to share a story, and thank you. You're right. Where am I in the prayer process? Okay. The beginning, the Amidah begins, Adonai Sifetai Tiftach Ufi Yagid Tehilatecha. God, open my mouth and I will proclaim your greatness. So that God has a piece, according to the liturgy, that liturgy, in helping us to communicate with God. It's a two-way street. Okay, I want to share a story before I introduce, by way of introducing the next of the poems. About 13 years ago, I had to have some serious surgery. This is so hard to do when I can't see faces. All right. I had to have some serious surgery. And the risk of the surgery wasn't to my life. It was to my voice. Now, I don't know how many of you know this, but I used to have an operatic voice. 3 scales through octaves. High C was no problem. And also, as a rabbi, my voice was an integral, still is, an integral part of who I am. And the idea that I might lose my voice and it would sound like this, which, as you can all tell, it didn't, but I did lose the opera, was terrifying. I was able to pray to the point that I could say, meditate, to the point that I could say, if the price of my life is my voice, take it. And then many years later, I heard this Leonard Cohen song. All right, it won't be opera, but I'll try to sing it. If it be your will that I speak no more, and my voice be still as it was before. I'm sorry. I will speak no more. I shall abide until I am spoken for, if it be your will. If it be your will that a voice be true, from this broken hill, I will sing to you. From this broken hill, all your praises, they shall ring, if it be your will to let me sing. If it be your will, if there is a choice, let the rivers fill, let the hills rejoice. Let your mercy spill on all these burning hearts in hell, if it be your will to make us well. And draw us near and bind us tight, all your children here in their rags of light, in our rags of light, all just to kill and end this night, if it be your will. Who is the God? What is Leonard Cohen's understanding of God in this poem? Do you need me to keep the, I'll keep the words up. And I can't see all of you, so please jump in, whether or not you're on video. What is Leonard Cohen saying about God?
Well, it's pretty much saying that, whatever you decide, that's it. I'm with it. So, I mean, that first paragraph is so powerful.
Yeah. You can see why I shared that story.
Yeah, I mean, if it's your will, it's your will, and you know, I have no say in the matter. It's complete surrender.
But it's also, it's a matter of God's power, you know. Because God is what is going to happen is not always our choice. It's almost predestined in a sense. Not really, but
Let's explore the not really, but. Do you believe, honestly, do you honestly believe, and the answer could be yes, in God as the causal force of the universe? Everything that happens is because this is what God has ordained. Going back to who by fire, God literally writes our fate on Rosh Hashanah and seals it on Yom Kippur. Is this really is this what you believe?
I think it's hard for me to believe that sometimes because of the tragedy that is overwhelming, that I receive from multiple sources as in reflection or in opposition to the kindness that may be there. And to have someone in control of all that is tragic is hard to accept as a willful act.
it absolutely questions the concept, everybody's conception of what God is.
What is the conception in this poem? Just
Well,
so we can give it words. What is the conception in this poem?
He thinks that we need God's presence because he's clearly describing a people who don't always see through the light or to the light. He describes them a little bit, it's not the right word, but a little bit pitiful or in need, children in need of tutoring.
So God would be the tutor, is what you're saying. God is there to teach us.
He's taking his combs.
I think the song is something of a prayer almost, that it's asking to be given the ability to express oneself, but that if it's God's will not to allow that, then it's, you know, there's no getting around it. That, you know, God's will be done, so to speak. But it is sort of requesting, let me be able to speak and sing your praises and express how I feel.
So what I'm hearing you all say is that in this poem, God is depicted as all powerful and controlling our destinies, etc. The who by, back to who by fire, who by water. Okay. Do you believe that God is all powerful and that God is controlling our destinies? And that may just be something you don't want to share, you just want to think about.
That brings up the whole issue of free will.
Exactly.
So if you believe that there's free will, it's not so much that God is controlling everything, but more that God is all-knowing. He already knows maybe before you've decided what it is that you're going to do. He knows what the outcome is going to be. You may not know, but he already knows.
Stacy, I think you said, or somebody said, that they found that first paragraph, or Carla maybe, that first paragraph so compelling. Okay, if we do, can I ask you a personal question, Carla, or would you
Yeah.
rather?
Oh, no, go ahead.
Do you believe that God is all powerful and that God will control whether or not I lost my singing voice?
No.
Okay, then how come, I'll tell you this, I don't either. And yet I found this poem, it moved me to tears. So my question is why?
Well,
Why
Rabbi,
does something that we may not believe in literally, why do we find it so compelling?
Because the author clearly believes it. And the sense that I saw in that first paragraph of just this, and I use the word surrender, but I'm not sure it's not willing. It's just, whatever, if that's what you want, if that's your calling for me, if that's your path, whatever it is, it's okay. And the author seems to be, giving in to this sense of, I don't necessarily like the word, predetermination, but whatever path you have chosen, this God or whatever has chosen for me, I'm okay with it because it's beyond me. And I think that's why I said I think the author is just giving up completely, but not necessarily in a bad way. It's a choice to believe that this is chosen for me. I choose not to believe that, but I mean, clearly multiples of people feel very comforting knowing that, well, even Bobby, you're talking about bad things. Well, yeah, but it's God's plan. So while it's bad, it's not bad because it's all part of the plan. And I think people draw comfort from that because it makes tragedy seem less random.
Random. What's the alternative? The alternative to God, to someone not being in charge is randomness. Yes? No?
well, Rabbi Gloria, I mean, this is Alan. There are some things over which we have control, at least.
Right.
We have control and we can do things one way or another, choices. There are things over which we don't have control because maybe we don't know enough or because they truly are not under our control. I mean, the way I like to think of it is a river flowing. The river starts somewhere and ends somewhere. And the flow of water is going to go on. There's going to be a path. It's going to happen. But the individual water molecules interact with each other in very different ways. But the whole flow is going in one direction. So one can think of things, a universal force that's going in a particular direction. But that doesn't negate the fact that the individual molecules or the individual people are going to make individual choices. But the flow will continue and go in one inevitable direction. So you have to separate, my view, the macro of what's happening, and then the micro of what's happening. So perhaps the micro, we all have choices to make, but in the macro sense, maybe we don't.
Can I jump in? I think that the prayer or the way, we need a way to rationalize what's happening. We need a way to feel there's some cause or effect, because if it's not in our control or anybody's control, as you said, the chaos or randomness just feels, we have a world that's out of control and we're out of control in it. And we need to fasten ourselves to something or someone. I heard a story on NPR today that there are 2 billion Muslims. 2 billion people that believe in one religious belief system, but that's a phenomenal number to, follow the teachings of Muhammad and to pray in a particular way. And that doesn't speak about Catholicism or any other major religion as to where they're making a connection to, whether it's Buddha or Jesus, but they're following the teachings of someone because they feel that makes a connection for them, because we just can't live in a world that's random.
We need an image. We need something, someone to reach out to in our anguish, in our longing, in our hopefulness. Does that sound like what many of you are saying?
I think it's a parallel, if you're familiar with the country song, Jesus Take the Wheel.
Yep.
I think that's just what it's about, that, they've sort of reached the end of their rope. They no longer know what to do, and they're putting their fate in God's hands.
And in Christianity, for example, you have the image of Jesus.
Right.
And that's, for Christians, that's a very powerful image. There's someone to pray to besides whatever our concept of God is. Anyone else want to say anything else about this one before we go on to the next?
It's just that it's funny if you're putting your faith and your future in this image of God, because in both of these examples, the God that's being depicted is pretty tough. You don't get the loving kindness as much as, especially the first one. I mean, it's a listing of ways people are going to die. So
Not in Unetana Tokef. In Unetana Tokef, it's who will live in the original prayer.
right.
It's who will live or who will die.
Right, but then it goes on. There's this. That's true. I mean, I guess they're balanced.
But not in the Leonard Cohen poem.
No,
Right. Right.
I thought we were discussing. I was
No,
leaving out the
we're-
original, or
I
I don't
think
know if the
that-
original, but
Maybe I misunderstood you.
I think you're also talking about the need for a belief system. That's,
Mhm.
that's what you're talking about. And I think Carla really hit it in terms of comfort, that, people, even, it's such a difficult concept of what God is, so that you may not believe that there is a force, but meanwhile, you're busy praying to this force.
And that's a very compelling thing. Again, when I heard this for the first time, it moved me to tears, because it spoke to the experience that I had had.
Rabbi, I'm just playing timekeeper. You're at 8:32. I'll bet you have more to present.
I sure do. Let's go on to the end. Some of the other ones are longer. Okay, let's go on to the next one. The mood shifts. Someone want to read?
Carla, go ahead.
if you are the dealer, I'm out of the game. If you are the healer, it means of broken and lame. If thine is the glory, then mine must be the shame. You want it darker, we kill the flame. Magnified, sanctified by thy holy name, vilified, crucified in the human frame, a million candles burning for the help that never came. You want it darker.
Hineni.
Thanks. Hineni, I'm ready, my lord. There's a lover in the story, but the story's still the same. There's a lullaby for suffering and a paradox to blame, but it's written in the scriptures and it's not some idle claim. You want it darker, we kill the flame. They're lining up, this is like so depressing. They're lining up the prisoners and the guards are taking aim. I struggle with some demons. They were middle class and tame. I didn't know I had permission to murder and to maim. You want it darker. I'm assuming there's another we kill the flame.
No, not here.
Oh, you want it darker, it just ends?
Yeah, there it does, yes.
Ah,
And then he goes to
interesting.
column 2.
Hineni, I'm ready, my Lord, magnified, sanctified by thy holy name, vilified, crucified in the human frame, a million candles burning for the help that never came. You want it darker. If you are the dealer.
Yeah, that verse repeats and then it ends.
Oh, okay. Hineni, I am ready, my Lord.
Yeah. In the interest of time, let me unpack some of the images in this poem. Okay. Do you recognize magnified, sanctified be thy holy name? Do you recognize where that's from? That's the Kaddish. Yitgadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabbi.
Yeah.
That's a translation of the Kaddish. Hineni. Hineni is Abraham at the Akedah. When God tests Abraham, he calls Abraham and Abraham says, Hineni, here I am. Hineni is the Shaliach, the prayer of the Shaliach Tzibor, same word, same root. During high holiday services, before the repetition of the Amidah, before the repetition of the Amidah, right? Musaf Amidah. And it's the prayer leader is pleading, don't punish the people for my sins. I mean, this really resonates with religious images. And also, I didn't know I had permission to murder and to maim. We just read it in the Torah, those who come to shul. The commandments kill all the Canaanites. I mean, there are many passages in the Torah that talk about when you get to the land, kill everybody. The Amalekites, kill all the Amalekites. So I think that that's the source of that. It's fascinating. If you're the dealer, I'm out of the game. If you're the healer, it means I'm broken and lame. Next week, we're going to talk about the fact that we look at God as Rephaenu, our healer. Okay? With that additional, and you know, in Christian theology, there's the magnified, sanctified be thy holy name. Vilified, crucified in the human frame is clearly a reference to Jesus. A million candles burning for the help that never came. Do you know in the Christian tradition, they light a candle as part of the prayer process for individual prayer. So all of that being said, what do you make of this poem? Vastly different from the first two.
Yeah, this one is extraordinarily pessimistic, and it's one that basically, vilifies God, whereas the other two poems are asking for help from God, basically. And so it's a totally different frame of mind, a totally different approach. I don't want to have anything to do with you if this is the world that you have created. And the first two are basically appeals for help.
But yet he's saying Hineni.
Yeah. Hineni, I'm ready for the disasters that perhaps you will bring. I mean, it's sort of a call, a kind of call of helplessness, I think, not a call of I'm ready to do your will. It's sort of, okay, I'm here and I will take the consequences.
Then what do you make of you want it darker, we kill the flame?
Very fatalist position. It's like God has already predetermined that this tragedy is just more tragedy after tragedy, and the candles are gone, we kill the flame, and the end is about to be there. But recognize, here I am, but it looks like I'm coming to an end.
When was this written?
I don't know, but it's one of the more contemporaries. It was on his last album, which is called You Want It Darker. This is the first song on his last album. And I know on his last album, he was struggling with his relationship with God. He was open about that. He talked about that. And it runs the gamut. It's an incredibly interesting album.
It strikes a chord with me about the Holocaust and how God apparently let the flames of the people die out, and he wanted it darker for whatever reason. And that's the kind of reading I get into it.
And what do you make of the fact that it's we killed the flame? You want it darker, we killed the flame.
We are the people, and the people are of the world. That means the Nazis, and that means the Jews, and means the Gypsies, etc. It's we is everybody. We allowed it to happen collectively.
According to this poem, why? Why did we allow it to happen?
Well, it makes it sound like God wanted it. Said, you want it darker, we kill the flame. So we're giving in to what God wants.
It says there's a lullaby for suffering. It sounds like he knows his end is not far off, and it's just time for the music to end, and this lullaby is one of desolation and death.
I'm waiting for your comments.
I think that one of the telling things is a million candles burning for the help that never came.
Mm-hmm.
Really, Bob talked about the pessimism, but it's where is God in this?
Well, I don't think it's consistent.
The poem itself?
Yes, because I think in some paragraphs, as someone just said, where is God? In others, God is controlling the narrative.
Is it asking where is God?
It's also about us, because it's we kill the flame, so it's our responsibility in the whole thing. Very, very complex poem.
Mm-hmm. Who might use this poem as a justification for actions?
Ooh. Evildoers.
Okay.
Ask the question again. Who might
use this? I don't know, how did I phrase what I said?
Who might use this?
I mean,
Who might use this poem as a justification for action?
Yeah, I agree. It's a justification for evil. You can read this as a complete justification for evil. I agree with that point of
So
view.
then who is God in this poem?
The bad guy?
End of death.
Okay, and remember, I went through it quickly. Maybe I should have had a sheet on it, but in the Torah and in these scriptures of the other major religions, it says, kill everybody. Jesus says, I come, not, I can't remember the exact quote, I'm sorry. But it's, I bring the sword. And I can't remember which gospel either. I apologize. Should have looked up that source. But a million candles burning, people prayed for the help that never came. You want it darker. Hineni, I'm ready, my Lord.
It's the battle cry.
Is this the God you believe in? This is an aspect of God. I can show you the Torah proof. Deuteronomy 7.
Well, aren't these the parts of the Torah that the rabbis over the centuries have tried to interpret away or to read differently so that it wouldn't be as bad as it literally sounds? Isn't this sort of, one of the, it sounds like one of these passages that you might want to read away or reinterpret.
There's a wonderful book by Rabbi Daniel Hartman of the Hartman Institute in Jerusalem called Putting God Second. And he says passages like Deuteronomy 7 are examples of an autoimmune disease. And, he talks about it in other major religions also, that the God we worship, the God we understand, would never say, kill all the Canaanites. So if we see something like that, we have to say, this is an example of an autoimmune disease and reject it. It's a fascinating book. Again, the title is Putting God Second, if you're interested. Go ahead.
I would say it brings to mind that portion of the Quran that's always quoted about, the infidel behind the rock, and you're supposed to go out and kill them and kill all the non-believers. You go out and kill them. So that seems pretty consistent with the God image in this poem.
What's interesting about the Quran is, again, I'm a very close friend, Halima Krausen, who many of you met years ago when she was here. She said you have to take those in the historical context. In other words, it was in it, and I can't speak for what she said exactly, but it was in response to what was going on at the time. And I'll just leave it at that. And this, obviously, the Canaanite thing was in response to what was going on at the time. But we're praying to God, and this is an aspect of God, of the description, the traditional description of God. How do we feel about that? Does that color how we can pray?
So we're talking about all the attributes, 13 attributes of God in each one of these poems. There's a vengeful God.
Well, it's interesting what they did with the 13 attributes. If you look at the 13 attributes, the ones that made it into the Siddur are the positive ones. At the end of it appears several times in text, and the last time it mentions and takes revenge to the 10th generation or something like that. So that's been cleaned up for the Siddur, for the Machzor, the attributes of God. That ending has been eliminated. I didn't even think to have that, the original text on that. I'm sorry. So in light of this poem, you want it darker, we lit the candles, the help never came. Are we is he looking at a God that is unresponsive, unfeeling, uncaring? What is your feeling? And is this a God you can pray to? And then I better move on because Bob will nudge me about time. Harder to pray to this God than the others, huh?
Well, they're all pretty tough.
The other two, the first two, you found tough also?
Maybe not as much
The
as
answer
in
can
this
be
one,
yes.
but
The answer
no,
yes.
but there are degrees.
Right.
But yeah, I haven't found a real positive image yet.
Well, there's obviously a need for a willing suspension of disbelief. In other words, if you know what the history has been, what has transpired, what has been permitted, what has been encouraged, wait a second, do we really feel like praying to this particular God, the God that wasn't there? I mean, many contemporary people have that feeling when it is put up to them. Well, how can you really daven? How can you really worship when there was no God there? And we know that so well. We know that so vividly. And it's really a good question.
By the way, in terms of, I don't remember who brought up the Holocaust. Bob, you did, I think. Bob
Yes,
Dworkin.
Yes, I did.
Read up on the Piaseczner Rebbe. He was the rabbi of the Warsaw Ghetto. His book was called Eish Kodesh, Holy Fire. It's a collection of his teachings at the third Shabbat meal, Shalashudas. And what he answered the question, where is God? Now he's sitting in the Warsaw Ghetto, he's saying Kaddish for 5 relatives. And what he says is God, there's a concept of God and suffering in some aspects of the Jewish tradition that, well, here God is bringing suffering. He says this suffering has to be so great that God is sharing our suffering also. So where is God during the Holocaust? God is crying. It's a really profound understanding of theology at that time. It's Kleinimus Kalman Shapira, the Piaseczner Rebbe, and the book with his discussions is called The Holy Fire. It's in translation. He buried it in the Warsaw Ghetto with a note on the cover saying, if this is found, send it to my cousin in Tel Aviv. And it was found, and it was sent to his cousin. And that's how we have his works. It's extraordinary. It's extraordinary. That God must be suffering, that the suffering is so great that instead of God sharing our suffering, we are sharing God's suffering. That's what he said, which I thought was extraordinary. Extraordinary. Anyone else want to say anything else about this?
I'm just amazed he made this into a song. It's so depressing.
Yeah, it's a beautiful song. And in fact, he got, I mean, the music is beautiful. He got the cantor of a big synagogue in Montreal to sing at the end, to sing Hineni. Yeah. We're going till 9:30 or a little after?
A little after 9.
A little after 9? Only an
Yeah.
hour?
Let's say 9:15.
Oh, wow. No, let's not. Can we say 9:30?
You can say anything you want, but you may be talking to yourself. You never know.
All right, let's skip that one. All right. If we're going to end at 9:15. All right, let's look at this one. Steer your way.
You can do Leonard Cohen Part 2 another time.
I could, or we can start at 7:30. All right, we'll go straight to Anthem. I'm sorry. We'll go straight to Anthem. This is the one that's the most famous. It's an earlier one, and it's the one that he talks about, the one that's described as the definitive statement of his theology. Someone want to read?
Ask Bob Dworkin, see if he's available.
Bob, are you still available?
Well, I apologize, but I'm eating.
Oh, sorry, Bob.
It's Hayavon, Eskizin Tehed. The birds they sang at the break of day. Start again, I heard them say. Don't dwell on what has passed away or what is yet to be. Ah, the wars, they will be fought again. The holy dove, she will be caught again. Bought and sold and bought again. The dove is never free. Ring the bells that still can ring. Forget your perfect offering. There is, and these 2 lines are quoted more than any other 2 that he ever wrote in churches all over. and in synagogues, there's a crack in everything. That's how the light gets in. His most famous 2 lines. We asked for signs, the signs were sent. The birth betrayed, the marriage spent. Yeah, and the widowhood of every government, signs for all to see. I can't run no more with that lawless crowd, while the killers in high places say their prayers out loud. But they've summoned up a thundercloud. They're going to hear from me. And then the chorus again. You can add up the parts, but you won't have the sum. You can strike up the march. There is no drum. Every heart to love will come, but like a refugee. Ring the bells that still can ring. Forget your perfect offering. There's a crack in everything. That's how the light gets in. This picks up on, I skipped 2 that deal more with his theology, and I went right to something that you talked about. What kind of world is he describing here? And what's his idea, his concept of God?
He's talking about the modern world,
Okay,
temporary.
Saying the world doesn't make sense. He's saying the world doesn't make sense.
in what way doesn't it make sense?
You can't add up all the parts. You can add up all the parts, but there's no sum. No world. Everything is
Okay. The birds they sang at the break of day start again, I heard them saying. Don't dwell on what has passed away or what is yet to be. The wars, they will be fought again. The holy dove, she will be caught again, bought and sold and bought again. The dove is never free. What kind of world is he describing besides a chaotic, discombobulated world? Marty just said Groundhog Day. He never is comfortable sharing. Groundhog Day. What does that mean? I
Same
know
thing
that's
happens
the-
over and over again.
The same thing happens over and over again. You remember Kohelet, Ecclesiastes? The sun also, verse the second one, the sun also rises and the sun goes down and hastens to his place where he arose. Okay, start from the beginning. What profit has a man of all his labor which he takes under the sun? One generation passes away and another comes, but the earth abides forever. The thing that I'm skipping down to the bottom, the thing that has been is that which shall be, and that which is done is that which shall be done, and there is no new thing under the sun. Kohelet, the book of Kohelet. Some people attribute it to Solomon. Okay, and that Marty saw without my discussing it with him or prompting as the theme of this. What do you think?
Well, you've got that, but I'm fascinated by there is a crack in everything. That's how the light gets in.
What does that mean? What does that mean?
Well, because all right, so there's a crack in everything. So things are not perfect.
Right.
But it's the imperfection that leads to the light. So the imperfection is spun in a positive fashion.
Okay. So when we're standing there, how does a thought like that affect us?
Well, it actually ties into the line before about ringing the bells that can still ring, forget your perfect offering. With the part that interests me is you don't need to be perfect. And it's the imperfections that he's welcoming. So
Yeah.
yeah, there's all this stuff going on, but that's where the good stuff comes from, the imperfection.
And nothing ever changes. Do you see the nothing ever changes in this?
Yes.
So if nothing ever changes, why are we praying? If that's what you believe, you may not believe that nothing ever changes. And that's okay too. I'm just trying to throw out some controversial things for you to think about going into the high holidays.
I don't think this poem is saying that nothing ever changes. I mean, Kohelet certainly does, but I don't think this says the same thing.
You don't.
Certainly the first part sounds like it, about being bought and sold and bought again, how the dove is never free. But the other things, the every heart to love will come, but like a refugee. So there's a price to be paid, if you will. It'll come, but like a refugee, you know, seeking shelter from something horrible. And the fact about forget your perfect offering. We've been studying Mishnah with the Rabbi, talking about all these different offerings and how if it has a blemish, it can't be offered. This is saying that there is nothing that's perfect. There's an imperfection, and that's how you see the light. So I think there's some things in here that are hopeful, not totally Groundhog Day, that, you know, that there's.
The first paragraph sort of talks almost like Buddhism, the idea of just being in the moment. Don't dwell on what's passed away or what will be.
Okay. Yeah, live in the moment. I tie that back to what some of you said about the scariness of living in perhaps a random universe.
And start again, I heard them say. So there's another chance, if you will, to get it right. You know, just start over. Even in Groundhog Day, each time he went through, he learned something new. And he was able to move forward to a certain degree.
So you think that it's possible for things, according to this poem, it's possible for things to change. Things are changeable.
And not only that, but light is considered good and darkness is considered bad. So God is good, God is light. And even though there's lots of bad, there's still cracks in everything, and light gets through, therefore God gets through. So there is hope.
And so do we have to worry about saying every prayer perfectly for high holidays?
The ultra-Orthodox, not me.
I'm talking about us. By the way, have you noticed that the Vidui, the confessional, is plural? We have sinned. The philosophy being that if we've created a society that in which one person can commit any of these sins, that we all bear communal responsibility.
It's
So
the
it's
reverse.
not about the individual, huh?
I think it's the reverse. I think that the community can make a mistake. We can all go along with a belief system, and we might all be guilty, and our leader who led us that way, or something led us into astray, we become guilty. But I don't believe it's that because the mistake of one, we are all guilty.
Oh, no, that's not what I was saying. I was saying pretty much what you were saying. And if I didn't express myself clearly, I apologize. But what I was saying was that the theology, the philosophy, if you will, is that if one of having a, we have sinned, we have done this, we have done this, we have done this, you know, well, I didn't do X, Y, Z, and maybe M, N, and P, you know, but not all of them. But if as a community, we followed a leader or we created an environment in which it was possible for someone to do something on that list, then we should look at ourselves as a community. We should ask ourselves, are we following the right leader? Does that help, Bob?
Yes.
Okay. So how do we live? 9:15, huh? How do we? I thought it was.
Is there life after 9:15?
I'm sorry, no life after 9:15.
Yeah.
Okay, then I think we should start summing up. What helps, what help is there in the liturgy to how do we live in a random universe? To how do we face perhaps that things never change? How do we face that perhaps at times it seems like God wants it darker? And how can we say Hineni, okay? There's something in the liturgy that we
Well,
can
we ask for forgiveness. It's the opportunity to be forgiven, to appeal for our sins and ask, you know, in our fast for the permission to continue, that life goes on, to although we have sinned, to avert the severe decree, tzedakah, and tefillah, and what am I missing? The third one, tzedakah, teshuvah. Teshuvah is really what it's about, and the fact that we can have teshuvah is an opportunity for us to move forward. That's the crack in the wall.
I read a wonderful commentary on teshuvah, tefillah, and tzedakah. Look at the end of the sentence. Have the power to transform the harshness of our destiny. I mean, most of you said that you don't really believe, at least if I'm remembering correctly, that God writes in a book, you know, our fates are determined, that we'll be zapped if we don't get it right. And you talked about the fact that these are helpful images that we can connect to in perhaps our brokenness. Did I get that right? Anyone want to correct me?
Oh, sounds right.
Okay. So what can we hold on to? It's not if we do teshuvah, tefillah, and tzedakah that we will get on God's good side. That's not what this verse is saying in the Hebrew. It's saying they have the power to transform the harshness of our destiny. This is what we can hold on to. We can hold on to atonement, teshuvah, return, making ourselves the best possible people we can be. We can hold on to prayer, however we envision God. And sometimes it's nice to have an image instead of praying into a void, you know, praying without an image of something, some force out there that can influence our destiny. And we can give tzedakah, we can help take care of other people, which gets back to Anthem, the last poem about living in the moment. That's what this verse is saying from the Machzor. That ultimately is what we can hold on to in a random universe.
We all know that we're not perfect, even though God made us in his image or her image. But we get empowered by doing these things. We feel better when we do these things.
Right.
And we all know that we sin because we're not perfect. And it's a good relief to know that there's some way that we can kind of atone, even just by doing certain things like being charitable and being good to people. and things of that nature.
Yeah. Leonard Cohen said that he felt attached. This is from an article in the Vancouver Sun right after he died by Douglas Todd. He said, I think there really is a power to tune in on. Some people find it difficult. You mention the word God to them, and they go through a lot of difficult reactions. But it's easier for me to say God than some unnameable, mysterious power that motivates all living things. Should I read that again?
Yes.
It's easier for me to say God than to say some unnameable, mysterious power that motivates all living things. So ultimately, Leonard Cohen believed that there was a power in the universe, wasn't sure about always, at least as reflected in his poems, about how that power operated. But that power was out there, is out there, and that's what we call God. One of the poems that I was going to share talks about an internal God. God is self, ourselves. So there are no answers. God is unknowable. There are only questions that we can ask, and there are only things we can respond to. I chose to start this series by responding to Leonard Cohen's lyrics because it's sometimes easier to talk about what somebody else thinks than to identify right off the bat what we think and what we believe.
Yeah, I love Leonard Cohen stuff.
Yeah,
There was a secret chord that David played and it pleased the Lord.
that's right. Hallelujah.
Hallelujah.
Yeah. And Suzanne, remember Judy Collins sang Suzanne? That was written by Suzanne, takes you down to her place, but that was written by Leonard Cohen. I mean, he, towards the end of his life, he has another one I was going to share with you is called Treaty, where he says, I wish there was a treaty we could sign addressing God. I don't care who takes this bloody hill. I'm sad and I'm angry all the time. I wish there was a treaty we could sign. And, you know, in my notes, Abraham made a treaty on our behalf. What compels us to keep it? Why do we still feel connected to this treaty? So that's
Probably because of the covenant that God made with Abraham and us.
okay, but were you there, Bob?
Only in spirit, but not really.
Okay, today, you know, people, we have a society where people say, I have freedom of choice. I can do whatever I want to do, right? This doesn't affect me. I can make my own choices. I was getting on an elevator today, and I will not get on an elevator unless I know the vaccination status of the people in the elevator. And so I asked this young woman wearing a mask, may I ask if you're vaccinated? And she said, why do you want to know? I said, because I won't get on an elevator with someone who's not vaccinated. I thought that was perfectly understandable. And she said, well, I won't get on an elevator with anyone who asks that question. And she stormed off. Okay.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.
You got the elevator. You win.
Yeah, and then I get on the elevator and there's a guy in the back not wearing a mask. It
Oh, well. Oops.
Yeah. At least she was wearing a mask. But treaty is about the covenants. And maybe we'll look at it another time. We should have a second session. You're right.
Yes, excellent. It's an excellent idea, Rabbi.
A second session on Leonard Cohen. But for next week's session, what I want to do, we've all agreed, I think, that we need images we can't pray. It's difficult to pray to, as Leonard Cohen said, an unnamed force. Okay, so we call that force God. In the Machzor, there are different names used for God. Avinu Malkeinu. We all wait for that to come around. You know, Avinu Malkeinu, our Father, our King. And there are others. And what I'd like us to do, what I plan to do next week, if you join me, and I hope you will, is to look at those images. Now that we've had some exercise, some experience in talking this way, what are the images presented and how do we relate to them? And if we don't relate to them, is there a way we can relate to them? That's going to be next week. And it's on Tuesday. I remembered, Bob, to mention that.
Good, Tuesday, 8 o'clock.
I'll tell you why. I'm having an eye exam on Monday and they're going to dilate my pupils and I'm not going to be able to see at 8 o'clock at night. So we have to make the session on Tuesday. Be very honest.
Well, Rabbi,
Any last thoughts?
Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Was this helpful?
Definitely was a
Fascinating.
very, very powerful topic and one that you could easily have a series on and we would not be bored. It is compelling, not only the questions, yes, great timing before the high holidays, but these are questions that we experienced or asked or may continue to ask as we go forward. And we try to rationalize our own lives or our children's lives. And you had an audience that stuck with you the entire time. I think that was reflection of the quality that you brought forward tonight. So I know next week will just be just as powerful. And I'd encourage anyone who joined us tonight to invite someone else to join us at this same time, same station.
One doesn't rely on the next.
Right. All right. Well, we'll do Tuesday at 8 o'clock. That we'll be speaking with Rabbi Rubin again. And this is a discussion, and thank you all for participating in that discussion.
Yeah, and I hope it does. When I asked, was it helpful? I was not looking for a pat on the back. I was looking to know that this was useful. Pat on the back is nice. I'm not complaining, but I was, you know, that this kind of discussion, especially going into the high holidays, is helpful and useful. I mean, we talk about a lot of things as a religious community. And as Max said the other night when he spoke, the minister who spoke, he said religious institutions don't often talk about God. So
I think it was very timely, Rabbi, to
going into
open up. Yeah, exactly. To open up our thoughts and our hearts to sort of delve into the question of how do we feel about these things and prepare us for the high holidays that are coming. So
as I said at the beginning, who are we pouring out our hearts to? Who are we praying to? Who are we promising atonements to? What are we doing now?
I think you should have written an op-ed so it came out this week, so people might have given that even more thought.
Well, I'm a writer, but I'm also a teacher. I like to teach.
All right. Well, you
And
did a good job tonight.
thank you all for sharing your thoughts and your ideas with me. It's like a sacred trust to hear your ideas and for you to share. I mean, this is deep stuff, to share your theology with me. It's all different. Everybody is different and everybody approaches God and everybody approaches these ideas differently. And I'm humbled by the fact, by what everyone has shared tonight. So I thank you.
Thank you very much
again, Rabbi.
Thank you.
It was a very powerful presentation. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Very, very good.
And see, Amy, I kept
Thank
my
you.
promise. I didn't call on you.
You did.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
I won't tremble for next time.